Good morning, everybody. I see you coming in. Thank you for joining us to part 4, our 4th and final installation of Taking the Awkward Out of Awkward Conversations, navigating the power differential. And we are going to finish up our series today with this subtopic of our overall topic of awkward conversations. Joining me today are our 2 panelists, experts in the topic, but maybe not experts in awkwardness themselves. Who knows? We have Mr. Chris Murdoch, who is the co-founder and chief sourcing officer of IQ Talent Partners, an on-demand talent acquisition firm in Nashville. And we have Miss Natasha Kahimkar, who is the CEO and founder of Melita Advisors. She is an expert executive coach, been working in the HR space for many years, despite her youthful appearance. So good morning, everybody, and thanks for joining us. Natasha, you want to just give us a little recap and what they can expect with today's topic?
You're muted. Awkward.
Very awkward. And you would think after this many months working remotely that I would have nailed this by now, but there you go. Stacey, I looked back at our last sessions and, we've done 3 other sessions. We started with just understanding what makes a conversation awkward, these differences of opinions, the emotions running high stakes conversations. And then in the second one, we talked about those strong emotions when they show up, people pushing their point of view or throwing their authority around, or maybe even their boss's authority around. And we learned how to de-escalate. And in the third one, our last one, we talked about the opposite scenario where people are silent or retreating, or it's the I'm fine, or sure, I can do that, no problem. And it's a problem. And today we're going to talk about navigating power differentials.
Thank you, Natasha. So I have a little poll here for everybody. So we navigate the power differential when we talk to someone who is typically above us, up the totem pole of power at the office. And but before we start, just want to let's see what you guys think about your own awkward conversations. What do you think is the hardest for you to have a conversation with leadership, management, a superior, like we're going to talk about today, someone who is your peer, maybe even a friend, someone who just won't respond and they just keep saying I'm fine, but maybe talk about it to other people, not to you. And then those that get defensive really quick and kind of can't find any blame or accountability in themselves and are a little bit angry. So think about those and see which one you think might be the most challenging, the most difficult to have. They're all difficult, they're all awkward. That's why we're talking about it. But we'll keep that poll open for a second today and let you guys decide. I know it's hard to decide which one is the most difficult. For some of us, they are all difficult. Looks like we've got about a tie with our defensiveness or with leadership. So kind of a tie between someone who's quick to anger and leadership. And what if that person is the same person, right? It could be the same person. So thanks for that, and I'm going to share those results with you guys so you can see that there.
Oh, look at that. So the second session that we did covered that quick to anger person. So definitely recommend looking at that. And you can see all of them on IQ Talent Partners YouTube channel, right, Stacey?
You can. We have posted all of our previous webinars, if you missed those, to our YouTube channel. So you can kind of go back. So if you are someone that does have challenges with a person that is quick to anger, that needs to be de-escalated, we did talk about that in our second webinar. So you can go back and review that if you know that is a challenging personality type for you at the office.
And so it looks like we've nailed the topic for today. It's clearly something that is on people's mind. So I wonder if we should start by talking about what a power differential is.
Yeah, tell us define what that would mean, to most people.
Well, Chris, I don't know if you want to jump in here and start. I'm happy to.
Go ahead, because I think my story will cover my perspective.
Yes, Chris always has a good story, so let's wait for that one. So power differentials exist when we have different power and influence than the other person or the other folks that we're talking with. So it can be tied to authority. It could be expertise. It could be seniority. So how long somebody's been in the company or in a specific team. It can also be tied to privilege. So I just want to acknowledge that privilege, whether we acknowledge it or not, it exists. And so power differentials can be in place when there's a privilege difference as well. And then there's the obvious one, the level, right? The executive that you need to talk to, and you're not at that level. Or maybe you're in a different function and you're talking about something in their area that we don't always have the expertise. So whatever the source of the power differential, the reaction to it can be that you feel on some level fear, right? You feel intimidated, you feel uncomfortable, or do I have to, or I'm dreading, and it usually comes down to some form of fear.
Yeah, whether, and what's interesting on that, it's sometimes the fear is projected, like talking about those people that are quick to anger and throw throw that out there. And other times it's internalized. So the power differential can be represented both externally and then internally. And so, my story is the internalized version. So my first week at Leming Levan in 1999. So this is my first job in executive recruiting. I was hired in as a research associate, and the admin crew decided to go out to lunch, and they asked me to cover the phones. Back when we still had landlines, we still had to forward and put people on hold. Cell phones weren't as pervasive. You didn't have voice over IP at all. So I said, sure, I'll cover the phones. I forgot to ask, how do you forward a phone call? I didn't think about it. They left. I had no way to get a hold of them when I got my first phone call. And the person that answered the phone was a CEO of a very large $100 million plus company, asking to speak to the name partner, Jeff Leming. And I hung up on him when I tried to transfer the call. I immediately got the pricklies on the back of my neck, and I'm like, okay, that didn't work. He called back, and I apologized, and I said, let me try it one more time. And I hung up on him yet again. And at this point, I'm thinking to myself, he's going to be angry, he's going to be pissed, and then Jeff's going to be angry, and he's going to be, he's going to fire me on the spot. And I was full of dread. So I answered the phone, and this time he was laughing. And he said, everything's fine. And I said, yeah, it's my first week on the job. They didn't train me how to forward a phone call. Is it okay if I put you on hold and walk down the hall and let Jeff know that you're on the phone? And he said, sure. And I walked down the hallway, and now this is the other time, I had that power differential in my head. Jeff's going to fire me for not knowing how to transfer a call. And for hanging up on someone who was either a friend, a potential candidate, or a client. And I get in there and I said, Jeff, I'm so sorry, but I don't know how to forward a phone call. And I've hung up on your friend twice. And so I've got him on hold. He walked down the hall, and he was angry, but not at me. He was apologetic. He said they should have trained you on how to transfer or forward a phone call. The gentleman on the phone said, to Jeff, make sure you tell him he's not getting fired, because it's an honest mistake. It's a genuine mistake. And I think he heard the fear that I had created in myself because of who he was, and the role that I thought he played in Jeff's life. And then also I thought Jeff was going to fire me because of the role that he had in the firm. And I was wrong on both counts. But man, I was hot. I was sweating.
Yes, anybody would be.
Every part of me thought, I'm about to lose a job that I really was excited about.
I think we can all empathize with that feeling when we've done something and made a mistake, especially with with a person in leadership or the CEO. You just it's an awful feeling, and we can all empathize with that. And so with that in mind, knowing that we have to have that conversation, Natasha, what do you what do you recommend a person that, had experience, like Chris, that is walking down the walk of dread, if you will, and having that feeling of having to have a conversation with a superior? How can they better prepare and lessen some of that fear?
Well, and Chris had all these compounding issues, right? Being alone, having to talk to a named partner about, I don't know how to forward the phone, something that's fairly basic, but nerve-wracking when it's a new phone system. I mean, yikes. And first week, geez. So here's the core of it, that when we start from a position of fear, our brains don't function as well, right? We can't think about solutions as clearly. And so the first thing I would say is stop, take a breath, and assess the situation. So think about what message you want to convey. So that's the first piece. What message is it that you want to convey? Think about the person. What is their agenda? Even if you don't know somebody particularly well, you could probably guess a little bit, and you can test a little bit. What needs do they have? What objectives do they have to hit? What stresses might they be facing at this very moment? Maybe it's nearing quarter end. It's the halfway point of the year. That is always a big stressor for leaders, regardless of when the calendar year starts, because quarters tend to go on the calendar quarters, right? So these can be very, very stressful moments. But understand too, what is your intention? So not just what you want to convey, but why is it important? Why is it important for you to raise what you need to raise right now? And I share this because sometimes we get really riled up and we get really hot about a topic that matters to us very, very deeply. But when we think about it and we step back and we can actually assess, is that what's really the issue, or is there something else? Or how important is this relative to other topics that I need to bring up with this person? Balancing that allows you at a point in time to also be Elsa and let it go, right? So
everyone's going to have that song stuck in their head.
I'm so sorry, and I'm so happy for you at the same time. But it is this moment where you have to stop and think, if this is really not that important, I'm going to let it go. But let it go doesn't mean dismiss it and keep it in the back of your mind and stay upset about it. It really legitimately is stop, recognize that this is not a priority topic, and move on. Really put it aside and be okay that you're putting aside. So that's like that big swell in the middle of the song about let it go. You really have to take that and put it aside and really not look at it again and be okay with it. And if you can't, then you know it matters. Some people, when they're feeling like they have something really important to say, they may feel a tightness in their chest, or they may feel that they realize that they're holding their breath, or that they may be clenching their fists under the table, or their backs are really tense. So sometimes you can physically feel when a topic really matters to you. And those are the moments where it's most important to stop and breathe and think through the scenario. Remember, leaders or anyone in a power differential scenario, they are in the same boat you are. They have to eat, they have to sleep, they have to drink water, they have to do all the things, all the things. They are human beings. So think about, are they someone who loves the power? Are they someone who wants to be a little bit, respected and visibly respected? Or have you seen them in other scenarios where something's gone wrong and they've actually been pretty chill about it? So how much of the stress of speaking to somebody in authority are you holding on to, and how much have they actually exhibited? If you take even 5 minutes, less, just take a couple of minutes to stop and think about that in the beginning, it can actually shift things for you and give you much better perspective. And when you have that moment to have that perspective, now you can plan, right? Now you can think about, they're data driven or they're more emotions driven. So I need to give them a feeling of not what the candidate experience is and how that candidate felt, but actually the data that we're getting back from candidate feedback, right? Or we need to say, we need to think about the roles that they're searching for. What is the real scope? I need to bring data. I'm going to do a heat map, which I know, Chris, you've done one of those for me, for a client of mine. where you do a heat map and you figure out actually the location they're going to be looking in, it doesn't have a high source of talent and there's high competition for talent. Is that the right location to move into? You know, I'm going to bring data to that conversation. I'm not going to be like, hey, you know, I'm not sure that that location is the right location. Bring data. Come prepared with both the story and the data and put it together. And now you're doing some storytelling with data. And there is actually a firm that does that, that helps companies with that. But this idea of having both in your back pocket allows you to pivot and adjust to what the person might need. But it's the preparation that comes into play when you're dealing with power differentials. The preparation makes a world of difference, and it helps you stay more steady.
Well, and you know, it's what's interesting. After that happened, I think having that experience happen in the first week in executive recruiting set the tone for the rest of my career, because I realized at that point that I was putting all of that fear into the situation. I put all of the awkwardness into that situation. And I realized at that point that I am going to make mistakes. I need to recognize and acknowledge when I make those mistakes, whether you know, regardless of who it is, where they are, where I elevate them. They put their pants on one leg at a time. You know, it was their people, they're humans. I don't need to be in fear. And then I pulled in some of the training from when I worked at the Dillards here in Green Hills. Garth Brooks was a client. Martina McBride was a client. You know, they came into my store. I sold them clothes. And when I worked at the Dillards in Atlanta, Usher was a client. He was a customer. And at one point he had to actually ask me, do you know who I am? Because I didn't lose it like everybody else. And he kept buying stuff from me. And after about 6 or 7 visits, he finally asked that question. He's like, do you know who I am? I was like, yeah. But once I explained, I know who you are, but I'm not going to lose it because you just want to buy clothes. Like, you just want to buy cologne. You just want to come in, do your thing and leave. You don't want to be hassled. You want to be a normal human. And I made so much money from him buying everything in my department because I was on commission.
I love that, Chris. And that Chris does also too, you know, having had that kind of experience early in your career where you felt that fear in approaching a superior. And I think Natasha gave us such that great advice about preparation, and then also taking a time to realize what that person is like and what you're making them like in your own head. How would you, we probably might have some other leaders on this call, you know, that probably have to talk to both superiors and have people that are maybe under them in the professional totem pole that have to come to them. And so what do you kind of say when you know that you know, one of your, you know, you're the head honcho, right? You're the co-founder here at IQ Talent Partners. So basically we're all below you. And so how do you remember to talk to any of your staff that needs to come and have a conversation with you?
I do my best to make sure that they know that my door, my Teams, my phone are always open, and that it's not a bother, because people would say early on, oh, I don't want to bother you. So now I'm proactively saying it is not a bother. It would bother me if you have a problem, if you have questions and you don't come to me, because then it means I can't fix what I don't know is broken. I can't help you through a situation if you don't tell me what that situation is. And so I am trying to get to everyone as quickly as possible. So from day one, I sit down with them and show them that I'm a human, that's not a bother. My calendar is always up to date. My Calendly link is in my signature. I am over communicative, that I am approachable. I am open, and that, you know, I'll be very clear, you know, in trying to help them.
I love that, because I not all leaders are like that. I'm here at IQ Talent Partners, and we're very blessed, but I do think that many are. And I think hearing, you know, some of our attendees, hearing you say that will help them in the future think about you and who you are as a leader and what you're thinking through, and that you want people to come to you so they can remember that moving forward when they have to approach someone in their leadership. They remember that Chris said, well, you know, he wants this. And I think that, you know, my leadership seems to be a lot like Chris, and which is really wonderful. And we're really blessed here. Natasha,
I think one of the things that I would mention too is, as leaders, as executives, we forget sometimes what our title is believe it or not, it's true. We forget the weight that our voice can carry. And so, there are things that you can do as an executive to change the dynamic, right? So in a conversation in a team meeting, maybe be the last person to speak. Allow other people to go first.
Yep.
So that your opinion doesn't cloud the situation, or your opinion doesn't sway the room, but that you invite others to participate first. You can share the topic, get other people's opinions. I mean, one way to do it would be to say something like, I have a perspective on this, but I'd love to hear from others first.
I love that.
Why not do something like that? And it invites conversation and dialogue and allows you to be more on the participant level. But just remember, you never are fully. No matter how lovely and kind and thoughtful you never are fully on the same level as everyone else. People have in their minds an image or an expectation of people in authority. So it's something to keep in mind. So there are ways to direct the conversation so that you're not the heaviest voice in the room. But I'm not going to go too far into this, Stacey, because I think, we have a little teaser at the end about what's up next for us. But I think that there's definitely more to talk about on this subject.
That's right. And so for those of you that haven't, maybe this is your first time with us or it's your fourth time with this fourth and final series, we do always try to wrap up with a role play. So we can maybe help you give some real world examples, and then maybe you can go back and rewatch the role play when you have to plan your own conversation in one of these roles. So we're going to do that for you today. We're going to set up where Chris is the person in power, and Natasha is the one that has to have an awkward conversation with him. And Natasha, you want to give us a little more context to that?
Sure. So Chris is our Chief Revenue Officer. He runs the sales organization. And Chris's team is mostly white men. Chris is having some trouble keeping women and people of color employees on his team. And as you can see, Chris is a white man himself. Most of the white men who work for Chris are also student athletes. So there is a little bit of a just like me thing going on, or at least that's my perspective as the head of talent acquisition. Now, as a director of talent acquisition, I typically would have a CHRO or a chief people officer that I report into. Unfortunately, there isn't one right now because the market. The people are moving around and there's no chief people officer, so there's no buffer. And I'm not on the executive team meetings. And yet I kind of feel that this conversation needs to happen.
Great. Let's go for it.
As you can see, I am not white. So
and as you can tell, or you probably can't tell, I'm not really an athlete.
So that too. All right. So Chris, let's just jump right in, shall we?
Absolutely. Hey, Natasha, thanks for jumping on a call. Glad you reached out. What can I help you with? Well,
Chris, I have something that I want to bring up, and it's an observation I've had over the past 6 months since I've been at the company. And I have to tell you, I'm a little bit uncomfortable bringing this up.
Uncomfortable how?
Well, I've made some observations about the recruitment patterns in your organization, and I wanted to share them with you. I'd love to just unpack them a little bit, but my intuition's telling me something that I'm like, I'm a little uncomfortable with, and I think that's what's making me uncomfortable. I think the other thing is, Chris, you're a lot more senior to me, and I don't know you that well, and sometimes getting into this kind of conversation can be a little bit hard. So just put it all out on the table.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I try to have an open door policy, and I know maybe I could do a better job about sharing that and making that known.
Oh, well, I really appreciate you offering that. So thank you. So as you can see on the slide that I've got up here, I looked at your recent hires, and I also talked with the people partners in your team. So the chart at the top shows some of the recruits that we've done, and it's broken out by gender, and you can also see it's broken out by race and ethnicity. The bottom chart shows the current makeup of your team and some of the attrition that you've experienced over the past 12 months. So I looked back beyond where I started so that you could have a clear picture of the data. So let me pause there and see, first of all, does this resonate with you? Do these charts look right to you?
I've never seen all this data in one place. I was aware that we have a diversity, issue in the organization, but seeing it like this, I had no idea. I've never seen this before, and this is really interesting. I got to figure out what to do next. Like, how do we fix this?
Well, Chris, let me stop for a second and ask, why is it important to you? Why is this important to you if this is standing out to you as a challenge?
Well, my boss, the CEO, has been pushing diversity and inclusion efforts throughout the firm and, throughout the company. And I'm trying to recruit. We're able to get recruit people in, but I just don't understand why they leave. Like, I don't get it.
Well, thank you for sharing that with me. I think that there is obviously a lot of benefit to having a diverse team, beyond the doing what's right, that your sales force can reflect the customers, reflect the communities in which we operate. There are a lot of benefits, but obviously one is certainly that the CEO is looking for more diversity on our teams. So look, I went back and I looked at the pipeline. I also looked at the job description, because when I looked at the pipeline, from the time we do outreach to the time that we hire, it seems to have a lot of student athletes coming through. When I looked at the common denominator, a lot of student athletes. And what we know about student athletes is sometimes, actually, let me stop there. Why student athletes?
Well, I played baseball in college, or through high school and college, and all my coworkers out of school when I first got into sales, we understand competition, we understand how to get stuff done, and we're constantly trying to better ourselves. So I've always just used that as a litmus test.
Interesting. When you think about student athletes, typically these are going to be universities, not really colleges, like technical colleges. Also, when you look at the student athlete population, it tends to skew more white. It tends to skew more wealthy, or not having to work to pay for school. So because being a student athlete is a full-time job on top of your schoolwork. And I wonder if by targeting our student athlete population, that we are already creating a pipeline that is going to skew in a certain way. What's your observation there?
Well, I never thought of it that way. I never looked at it that way. I've always just thought, I've been successful, and I've always credited my being a student athlete as one of part of the main drivers as to why I've been able to be so successful. So I've been trying to find people, I guess, more like myself.
Well, I mean, and it's a big blanket statement to say that all student athletes it's not true. We know that. But there is a tendency there. And so, I have for a long time really liked working with people or hiring people who work their way through school. And when I examined why, I realized it's because I did that. I worked my way through school, and I thought that it meant people had grit and determination and a stick-to-itiveness that was going to be important in the roles that I was hiring for. And so, I think even just having this conversation, and again, thank you for allowing this conversation to happen so freely. I see an opportunity for us to consider a different approach when we look at the characteristics of the job and the profile of the person that can come in. So I'd love to talk to you about that. And I know you have the attrition question too. So I wonder if the student athlete community is hard to break into.
Well, it's also pretty small, so it's a small community. So I now I understand why you were a little uncomfortable, because this isn't an easy topic. But I'm very grateful that you have brought this to my attention. I think we'll have to we'll get a more in-depth conversation together with my direct reports, and we'll work on a new game plan.
Happy to do that, Chris. We actually can go through an entire approach to review the profile, the ideal profile of your top performers, and adjust your job descriptions and our sourcing plans accordingly.
Awesome.
Great. So I'll call that one.
Great job, guys. Thanks so much. I think that, that has had a very successful outcome, also with a really great executive in Chris's role there. So really, really good job. And just to wrap things up, if you've got any questions, guys, throw them in the Q&A or write in the chat. We do always like to keep these to 30 minutes. We know people are busy. We want to give you just some quick information and some sound bites, and you can go back and tap it out a little bit further. But as a wrap up to the fourth and final in this series, Natasha, do you kind of just have what's your general template, your plan of action, just a bullet point list for all of our awkward conversations that people can kind of just take away and say, okay, if I have my next awkward conversation, this is my place I'm going to start? Absolutely. So the first thing is mind your reactions. So it's okay, pace yourself, take some time to think through and assess the situation, prepare, right? So think about what is it that you want to share? Why is it important? And what data or information will help? Be really good at open-ended questions. So tell me about, or say more about, or why is this important to you? These are things that will elicit dialogue and conversation. And then finally, I would say, know that it's okay to step away. If you need to call a break, especially with those heated conversations, take one, come back and revisit. And in this scenario, remember, like, I had stuff in my backpack. I was carrying a lot of stuff with me coming into the conversation. I expressed some vulnerability, which you may not always want to do in a situation speaking to someone in authority. But with Chris, I had to test the waters. I didn't know him. I hadn't interacted with him that much. And I was bringing up a touchy subject. So I wanted to be very careful about how I did it. But as you could see, I was inviting some conversation. I could have gone straight to solution. And at one point I almost did. And I stopped. I held myself back. And remember, you can always course correct yourself. Thanks so much, Natasha. That's such great advice. And before we leave, I do want to remind everybody that we are going to start a new series, probably in the early fall, on influencing and how to be a good influencer and influence others to what you need and what your department needs to best do your job. So certainly be on the lookout for that as the early fall approaches, and we will start a new series then. Also, for those of you who love Chris, as we all do, he will be on a podcast on Monday on Drive Through HR. It's a noon kind of lunchtime podcast. Of course, you can always download it anytime after it airs the first time, but be sure to follow us on social media. You can find it there, or just Google on Apple Podcasts or anywhere else you get your podcasts, Drive Through HR. And you will hear Chris on Monday.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, guys, for coming out, and have a great rest of the week and weekend. And we will get in touch with you as fall approaches. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Natasha. Thanks, Stacy.
Thank you so
Bye,
much.
everyone.